All right, Owls, this is Mr. O with week 2 of quarantine flip notes. It feels like we've been out of school for years, but it's only week 2. Keep that in mind. All right, last week we did 6L2.1, which was food, food chains, food webs, things cycled in an ecosystem. And now we're going to skip on to 6L2.3. There's a variety of different things in the standards: interactions, biomes, limiting factors, lots of different things. So as you do this, you can do one of two things. You could fill out the electronic notes that I left for you in Google Classroom, or you can do it on paper and pencil. It doesn't matter. You will not be turning the notes in. You'll be using them to complete this week's assignments. And actually, these set of notes will last this week and next week because we're going to be doing an at-home project based on biomes that we will use these notes for next week. All right, let's get started. Let's just go over some basics here. The world in general is made up of two different things. The first thing it's made up is abiotic things, and the second thing that makes up the world are biotic things. We will talk about what each of those mean in the next slide. All right, so you have a little table with biotic and abiotic. By definition, biotic is anything living. If you ever understand what the word bio means, it means life, like biology is the study of living things. Abiotic, without life, which means non-living things. Let's give some examples of these. Plants and animals, biotic. Water, rocks, and landforms are abiotic. The more I teach sixth grade, I realize that some teachers will teach you that if something was formerly alive, and now it's dead. It's still biotic. There's a lot of debate on that. I think we should just keep it simple and stick with things that are currently alive or biotic, and the things that are not alive, abiotic. Let's go with the order of ecology. Ecology, by definition, is how organisms interact with each other and their physical environment, meaning how do the animals deal with each other? How do the plants deal with each other? But not only just that, they also take in what happens with the environment that they're living in. This is kind of where we'll go to get to biomes. Now we're going to go smallest to largest here, and you're going to start seeing words that you've seen in science since like kindergarten. So the first smallest group of ecology things would be species or organisms themselves, like one particular thing, meaning like a cardinal bird. The next section out would be population, meaning you have populations of animals. And after that, you have communities, and you can start to relate these to humans if you think about it. You know, you are a species, you have a population of humans that go to Pine Hollow. They come from a community that is either from Briar Creek or the Sycamore area or the Pleasant Union area. And then communities form ecosystems. Some people misconstrue that ecosystems is actually bigger than what it is, but it's not. Then you go out to biomes. This is something you should have heard before: rainforest, deserts. And then everything in the world would be known as part of the biosphere. That's what entails everything living in the world. If you look at number one is included in number two. So when you talk about populations, you're talking about populations and species. But if you talk about ecosystems, you're talking about ecosystems, which includes communities and populations and species. So when you talk about biosphere, you're including everything after that. Okay, so there's things that affect an organism's ability to survive, and we in science talk about these as limiting factors. These are biotic and abiotic factors that can limit or control. Those kind of mean the same thing. The existence, number, reproduction, or distribution of organisms in a population, meaning if the limiting factors could be constraining or abundance, depending on what they are. And then that will let you know why there's lots of animals in the rainforest and why there's not many animals in the Arctic. It's because the factors there do not allow for the existence of a lot of animals, or in the rainforest case, it allows for a lot of animals in that area. Now we're going to separate these out. We're going to talk about biotic limiting factors, and they're also known as biotic interactions. Like I said in the first slide, this kind of set of notes includes a lot of different little things to it. And we're going to talk about three types of interactions that plants and animals deal with. Obviously, if we're talking about biotic, you're talking about living things. First thing is competition. Competition is something that things are competing for. So if you think about your backyard, if there's a bunny back there, there's multiple animals that can compete to eat that bunny. You have hawks and snakes, coyotes that will eat, or not coyotes, foxes that will eat that bunny, right? And then the bunny's eating grass, which the bunny's not the only thing eating the grass, so they're also competing for that. There's an interaction called cooperation. If you think about wolves, for example, for all you state wolf pack fans, they cooperate to eat and hunt. Fish do this when they school. They use a cooperation type thing that allows for them to exist and reproduce and eat. And the last one is predation. It's my favorite one because we get to watch videos of animals eating each other, which is always fun. Some people get scared and yell and scream because the baby elephant just got taken down by a pack of hyenas, but whatever. We'll see some of those in the next week or two here. So those are the three things that interact between animals and plants. Predation with plants is kind of limited. You have Venus flytraps and stuff like that, but not many plants are going out to hunt something else. But invasive species kind of do a predation type deal. It's just not predator prey. Now let's go to abiotic factors. These are also known as environmental limiting factors. Some of these things not really dealing with living, some you'll see here. But we're going to do some. These are not all of them. First one is temperature or weather. Remember, the difference between temperature and weather is daily, and climate is overall. So keep that in mind. This is daily temperature and weather. We have elevation. Keep in mind this doesn't ever usually change, meaning if you're in Denver, you're a mile high above sea level. That doesn't really change if you're in Denver. You have to leave Denver for the elevation to change. So an area's elevation is pretty consistent. You have the type or amount of soil in an area. You got to think if you're in the Arctic, you have permafrost. So the type or amount of soil is pretty limited there because it's always frozen. But if you're in a grassland, your soil is wonderful, like we talked about in the soil unit. Sunlight, that doesn't typically change. Basically, sunlight is based on where you are in the globe. And based on where you are in the globe, that tells you how much sun. If you're in the equator, you're getting a lot of sun. If you're near a pole, north or south, you're not getting a lot of sun. It's just how it works. Land, this doesn't typically change. And land means space, like how much area is there. So that doesn't usually change for an area. Lack, which means too little, or abundance, which means too much of water. Think about desert, doesn't get a lot of water. Rainforest gets a lot of water. Lack or abundance of food. This is all based on how many animals or plants can survive there. There can be too little food or too much food. So the more food you have, the more animals you have. Less food you have, less animals you have. Same thing goes for plants. And the last one we'll talk about is wind. This kind of is linked up with temperature and weather. So that is also an environmental factor. Now keep in mind there's plenty more. So don't rush out. Now these are different biomes that we're going to be listing here. If you Google biomes, sometimes you'll find 7, sometimes you find 9. I've seen as high as 17. I'm sticking with, I think, 11. But tundra is the first one. Coniferous forest is another. Deciduous forest. You'll realize there's a lot of forests. There's the temperate rainforest, a tropical rainforest, a desert, a temperate grassland, also known as the grassland, the savanna, a mountain, chaparral. That's a really uncommon one. Not uncommon to the world, but most people don't talk about that one. And the last one, nope, I did 12. Ocean is number 11, and then freshwater is number 12. Sometimes biomes are sorted out by land biomes and then water biomes. So I just did a variety. I did a dozen here. There's more, so you know. And then biomes in 6th grade, each biome has limiting factors that makes it unique. So before in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, when you talk about biomes, you probably talk about animal adaptations and what it took for an animal to live there. In 6th grade, you need to know that the limiting factors that are present in each of those places make something a desert, or the limiting factors make something a tundra. So that's what you need to know. And then the last thing we're going to do here is sometimes things happen that will affect the existing limiting factors in an area. So for example, let's use Raleigh as our thing here. If there was a drought going on in Raleigh, it's mid-July, what happens? Remember, I'm going to talk about this is some of these. This is not an all-inclusive list. But what will happen from this event will change the current limiting factors that we are experiencing normally here. So let's talk about some of those things that could be affected if we had a drought in Raleigh, which does actually happen like once every 5 to 10 years. You have a lack of water. Obviously, it's a drought. That's abiotic. But that would change in an area, right? Because of the lack of water, plants and animals start to die out. They lead to increased competition for food, which is a biotic factor that got changed because of the drought. There's a lack of water in the soil. Remember, in our soil unit, water is one of the 5 ingredients of soil. Well, that changes the type of soil, which is abiotic in the area, which affects what can grow there. And second to last one is lack of food. That goes up to numbers 2 and 3. Also abiotic. This is something that changed just because of the drought. And the last thing is it changes in the food supply that affects predation, biotic in an area, meaning if an animal always hunted off of a certain type of bunny, but that bunny starts to die off because its food source is gone, well, it has to go find something else to eat. So that changes all the existing food webs and food chains, which links up to the standard we did last week. But you can see like droughts have this, blizzards have this, hurricanes have this, tsunamis have these effects on areas. When these natural disasters happen, it will affect the limiting factors there for a short time, and it definitely messes up what's currently going on there. All right, so either way you did the notes, electronically or paper pencil. After this, you're going to watch some videos that I have attached in the assignment, and then you're going to do a quick Google check-in multiple choice test. I did have point values for the questions. Remember, your work is not graded. We're just looking for you to keep your skills sharp and to learn some content that you'll be using in future grades. If you have any questions about this, please know my office hours are 2 to 3. Monday through Thursday, and 9 to 10 on Friday. Hopefully you're not asking me questions about the notes on Friday, because that would be you way behind on the work. Either way, see you later.